Welcome, Courage Collective listeners, to this podcast recording. I am so excited to have Mr. Tim Winders here with me today. And he is the creator of Seek, Go, Create. And that means a plethora of things that we're actually going to learn about. So, welcome, Tim.
Thank you, Nikki. It's great to be here. Great to share with the collective that you have.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Please share your story with us. Tell us all about you and how you came to where you are today.
Wow. Well, when one is the young age of 57 years old, there's quite a good bit that may go into that. I know for those that might be seeing this on video, I don't look that old, but with that comes a lot of things. And I think the most valuable piece of the story might be, and that'll give you some things maybe to work with. I was really from the very beginning wired to to chase after success, and I use that word very intentionally, chase after success. Because and maybe this ties in over to some things we do on our podcast. We actually talk quite a bit about redefining success,
Mm,
because success in many ways is defined by those around us, by where we grew up, by how we're influenced, by the culture we're in, all of those things. Some of those could be good, some of them could be not so good, Nikki. And so I've told this a few times, but this is kind of funny. For those that are of this age, I could tell you're much younger, but those of my age, they will remember some sitcoms back in the 80s that were back in the Reagan years, that they were like they almost um, applauded people that were go 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 wanting to achieve success. There was also a movie called Wall Street with Michael Douglas, had slick back hair, he was in a big nice office in New York, and there was a statement that came out of that movie called "Greed is good," and that basically defined the era that I began defining my success.
mm,
I think I was a good person. I think I was nice. I was probably kind for the most part. Didn't do a lot of things that we would consider bad and all that. I was just chasing after success, and primarily that meant making money. And so
mm,
I became an engineer, went to Georgia Tech thinking that engineering might help. I started a business while I was at Georgia Tech, my first company. It did very well, and actually shut it down as I was leaving Georgia Tech in the late 80s, got married about that time. And everything about what I was pursuing business,
mm.
pursuing success. And I did come to a spiritual understanding. I'm a follower of Christ, and that's kind of what my wife and I do. And we try to do that as best we can in all areas of our lives. But all during the 90s, I was just chasing. I was going after it. We started businesses then. I was working in a corporate job. And Nikki, we saw some success because you can grind out some success when you are just putting some basic principles in place, working hard, showing up early, staying late, the hustle, all of those things. And so, and learning how to deal with people, probably learning how to manipulate people to some extent, but learning how to deal with people, work with people, win friends, influence, all of those things. And so, Nikki, we had a business that did well all during that time. We were building and growing our spiritual walk, trying to follow in Christ's footsteps more. And those businesses kind of faltered during the late 90s with the dot-com bust that some may be old enough to remember. And in the early 2000s, we started a few other companies that were real estate related. And just to kind of, I'm going to try to shrink this story down for you, but those companies did very well because we applied a lot of the principles we learned from previous businesses. We applied some of the spiritual principles we were learning. And we started buying houses. We bought three, four, five houses a month at times in and around the Atlanta market where we were, and started a coaching business that became a national membership coaching business, had a national lead generation business. All of those things were doing very well. They were all in real estate. They were all doing well as we moved to resort communities and had all the stuff and did all the things, and we looked good. This is the joke we used to have. We looked good, we smelled good. We had it going on. and and then 2008 happened. And just to kind of bring the story to a close quickly, 2008, living well, nice development, all of that. By 2013, we were homeless, bankrupt, living in a Honda van with almost all of our possessions. Okay. Now, my wife doesn't like using the word homeless. We use the word nomad. It sounds more spiritual, has more significance. But so that's where we were in 2013. So that's really bringing you almost up to speed. Now, that was about 7 years ago. So does that help?
Mm. That's amazing. Like, okay, I'm hooked. Like, we okay, so we're here and we're living in a van and we have our things and life is totally different. Where do you go from here? I mean, our listeners are entrepreneurs. We are walking through a really hard season of our life. I think most of us. Some of us are just knocking it out of the park. Others of us, it is a challenge. So here you are, and I would probably assume one of the biggest challenges of your life as a leader of your home, household, had it all going on, loving God, serving people, doing all the things, and where do you pick up from this place? Please share, continue.
Well, pickup is a difficult thing to say because the mind starts playing tricks on you. There's quite a bit of guilt and shame, humiliate, whatever words you want to use. And listen, I I I think that all of us will have to come to some degree of being humbled. My my hope is, as a coach, I'm an executive and business coach. I work with high performers. I work with people that lead and run organizations. It is my desire that people make a decision to change and adjust and exert the effort to do it on their own. But here's what I know is that many of us are going to face that time that we have to have that courage, where we're faced with that challenge, whether it be health, like I know you speak to a number of people on your podcast about, or whether it be financial or relationship or any other struggle or an international pandemic or an
Mm,
economic downturn. I mean, these things, I hate to say it this way, but these things are going to happen, and we are told that we're going to be facing trials and tribulations and
yeah.
other things. That is part of the nature of the world that we're in.
Mhm.
And so what we have to determine is, how do we respond? And I'm not going to say that myself or my wife necessarily responded well, but we did the thing that we knew had long-term impact. Because when this started coming along in '08, 9, 10, 11, we were still in a big old house, starting to get rid of furniture because we knew we were going to lose it, have to move. We had some hope, but it started getting worse and worse. And so many times we'd be sitting in that home before we left to transition from a large home into a Honda van. And we would just sit and study the word of God. We would spend time in prayer. Now,
Mhm.
Nikki, I won't lie to you. Many days, those prayers were probably begging. They were probably whining. They were probably doing a variation of Lord, why? We were
Mhm.
good. We did what we thought we were supposed to do. We were serving you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that was part of the process we were going through as far as our growth was. So when we came to that place where we were stripped, let's just say we were stripped of every material type possession we could have. And
Mhm.
someone would say, well, you still had a Honda van. Yeah, we did. We had a Honda van with 330,000 miles on it, with some Rubbermaid boxes with our stuff packed in it, and maybe a storage unit that we were able to put a few things away in. Our children at the time were at very unique ages. One was right at 18 years old, and the other one was finishing up college. And we told them, listen, y'all are going to have to do your own thing because there's no house to come home to. There is no home to come home to. Now, I try to convince myself that that's a great leadership development tool. You know that that's probably falsely trying to make myself feel better. But, I would say, you know what, this is great for the kids. They'll have to go out and make it on their own. I'm not going to say that. You'll have to talk to them and see. They probably are working through and sorting through. They're both well adjusted. They're followers of Christ. They've got their own businesses. We have one son that actually lives in an RV like we do also. So anyway, so there is a lot that's there, but the question I believe that you're asking is, what does one do when in the summer of 2013, they step away from a home that's been foreclosed, they've lost it. They go and they do the next step. And I'll tell you that we did the only thing that we knew to do by that time. We may not have done it sooner. We maybe should have done this sooner, but it was, Lord, what do you want us to do today? And it was that what we felt, submitting, sacrificing, and saying, guide us, lead us, tell us where to go. And so that began a journey for us. Now, the journey probably had started well before that, Nikki. I mean, we are all on a journey in life. And I think that part of what we go through is our learning and our lessons that we gain as we go through this life. Because it's not so much what we do when things are going great, it's how we respond when things are tough. What type of, as you say often on this podcast, what type of courage can we show? And I don't know that we showed courage. I guess maybe we did because we had no other place to go. Because we got in that van, we were praying, we were asking, begging the Lord, what would you have us to do? And he said, go visit some friends in Colorado. We went and visited friends in Colorado. We were getting, people that have a spiritual background will understand this. We were getting manna instructions. Mm-hmm. We weren't getting big instructions, and my wife and I like to plan. We don't really do spontaneous necessarily very well. She's a planner, I'm a planner. We like to do things strategically, and so we were getting manna steps. And so for the next 7 years, up until today, we ask, Lord, what is the assignment that you have in your kingdom for us today? And we just want to be positioned and humble and equipped to be able to step into that assignment today. And so that's really been our journey for 7+ years now, throughout all of these things. And you know what, it took us through New Zealand, Australia. We've stayed in, not owned, stayed in some of the nicest homes in the world during that process by house sitting. We have in the last few years, we've attended a Bible school during that time. For the last few years, we've lived in, for those that might see this video, an RV where I'm sitting in the passenger seat. So behind me is 39 feet of RV. That is our home now. And it's nice. We enjoy it. It's nice. And we have actually been restored or equipped financially to have more financial resources than we've ever had, even when we had 3 companies that did 7 figures or whatever they did. So anyway, so our transition, our mission, our purpose, all during that time was, what do we need to do today? What do we need to do today? And attempt to listen and obey.
Wow, like that's really powerful. I think that a lot of us can get caught up in like all the things that we have to do to accomplish this goal set before us. And I just think that like that's such a powerful word, really, of encouragement, and really like take this day, because really today is really this minute, this moment, this hour is all that we really have right now to live in, because nothing is promised to us. And I think being able to see you, and I don't know if I will share this video. I may have to, but being across from you and being able to see you, you seem like you have a very joyful, humble,
Mm,
but calm spirit, and that's evidence of where you spend your time and who you spend your
mm,
time with, which I can guarantee a lot of it is with God. And I am just honored to be here and be able to learn
mm,
about your story and the fact that, yes, like all of us are humbled in some way. And I think learning these tips and these tools of saying, like, this is really, really tough, but God, like, what do you have for me today that I can do for you, really? And it furthers, it really blesses not only us, but so many others around us. And I think that's the beautiful piece of him giving you opportunities to share and grow and be with others that encourage you as well. So just thank you so much for being vulnerable and willing to share that piece of your story, because I think that that will really encourage a lot of people that are struggling. Like, what do I do today? Like, how do I even like pick up from this point of homelessness, from this point of losing everything, from telling my kids, like, go ahead and like handle it on your own. Like, I don't know how to do this right now. Like, this is what we're doing, but you have to figure it out. And I, man, like, wow. And to know and to hear that the boys that you've raised are incredible, I'm sure, men of God and honor and integrity. Like, that's just so beautiful, just amazing to hear that and to just have this conversation. So thank you. And I was actually going to ask you about goals and like what that might look like for you. And I'm, as a coach, like, I don't know how you might go about this with others, but like, do you, as much as you pray and ask God, like, what do you have for me today? I'm sure that there are things in your mind, maybe not necessarily anymore, like, I have to achieve this to gain um like success as far as financially, but how do you, in a small space and where you are, like, how do you set goals each day um to move forward in what you're doing in the podcast and all of the things?
yeah, well, I mean, it's still a great question. I mean, listen, we still, I believe all of us have instructions that are more longer term. I
Hmm.
think I think what we all need to do though is at times not let our expectations and thoughts rule those, and make sure that they fit with, I'll just use the bigger picture, just in case you've got someone who's might be listening that doesn't have the same belief system. But how does it fit
Right.
into the bigger picture, to culture, society, to, if someone has a different belief system spiritually,
Hmm.
then how does it fit in? Because I think many times what happens is our expectations is what leads to disappointment, and disappointment leads to
Yeah.
hopelessness, and hopelessness leads to despair, and despair leads
Mhm.
to, depression and other things like that. And I did not just then simply define for people, mental health or anything like that. That was just a quick thought that came to some people might say, well, that
Sure.
was pretty quick that he got to that. But I've got some very large goals that I have been given during this time. At the
Mhm.
time that you're asking me these questions, my wife and I are in the process of establishing the legacy goals for not just us, but for generations that come beyond us. We are right now, just this morning, sat down and wrote out some notes for some foundational principles and guiding principles for what we believe is our family. We just became first time grandparents this last year during the pandemic. So again,
Congrats.
I know I don't look that old, but anyway, it is.
You surely don't. So I'm just going to put that out there.
Anyway, but we are, and part of just joy and living in the assignment that you have actually keeps us young and keeps us vibrant. And so there are some goals, there are some things in place. I've got some real specific items that I'm working towards this year with my coaching, with obtaining new clients,
Sure.
working with executive teams, with the podcast as far as downloads and reach, and I'm sure that you do with your podcast too, and with some of our finances and all those are there. But those serve the bigger picture. Those
Got it.
serve what
Mhm.
happens. They don't define me. And it kind of goes back to what I mentioned earlier as a very key theme to our podcast, and that is redefining success. We have to constantly ask ourselves, what is success for us?
Sure.
Because I think oftentimes, and especially in the first world cultures that we are all in, success can be defined by our title. You and I were joking about titles earlier when you were thinking about introducing me. You mentioned he's founder of Seek Grow Create. I said, hey, you could use whatever title you want, because titles don't matter to me. And but I understand it helps some people understand what they are. But titles don't necessarily define us. What we own doesn't define us. Our role or position doesn't necessarily define us. It may be a portion of it,
Mm.
but we all need to constantly ask ourselves, what is success for us? And you asked earlier about clients. I work with both ministries and businesses, for profit and nonprofit. In because we actually have a 501c3 nonprofit ourselves as a family, that we help ministries that are advancing the kingdom. We help them grow and do what they need to do and accomplish.
Mm.
And then I do the same thing in a for-profit realm for business owners, organizations, companies, etc. And one of the biggest things that I do right out of the gate is I attempt to define what success means for that leader, for that leadership
Mhm.
team. And
Powerful.
so, Nikki, we have to start that process. Now, one of the things I recognize, if I were to talk to you and say, Nikki, how do you define success? What does it mean? I recognize that it's probably not a 45-minute conversation. It
Mm.
is a process, not an event, to define who
Yeah.
we are and what we're doing to achieve and accomplish the assignments that we have in this world. And
Mm.
so I fully recognize that as I begin working with people and as I work with them over time, that the process of identifying those things can change, they can adjust. They don't usually do a 180, but they do course corrections along the way. So, what I
Mhm.
desire to be as a coach, as someone who's helping, is just be there as we adjust and correct, to listen, observe, and assist with that process. We do
Yeah.
strategic planning, we do goal setting, we do 90-day strategic initiatives. But if we
Yeah.
need to adjust, like all of a sudden in March of 2020, if the world shuts down, we might have to go into crisis mode. I mean, I
Mhm.
had clients that I won't give specific numbers, but they lost over $500,000 in business revenue in a 48-hour period, cancellations and things like that. And we
Sure.
had to move from strategic planning, and we had been talking about it because we had been seeing some of this going on, but we had to move towards handling the crisis.
Sure.
And you know what? I'm pleased to say that as year end 2020 rolled along, we didn't grow the business, but we finished up that year at about the same revenue numbers as we did in 2019. And so we're
Incredible.
positioned to see what happens and to move
Mhm.
forward. So I don't know if I answered the question. I think I started rambling quite a bit,
No,
but
but
we'll
it
just
it
say,
had to do with goals. No, it would
yeah,
that's great. I think,
good.
setting them, helping people set them, so you do set them, you're just not defined by what that actually looks like. I guess maybe from what I got, it's not the driving force, but there is some sort of plan in place. Um,
Yes. There's
so
structure.
that's
There's
yeah,
structure in
structure.
place,
Yep.
and we're not just bobbing around. There is some anchor there. We're not just
Yes,
bobbing around hoping, and hope is not a great strategy.
yep,
We're trying to listen, we're trying to be adaptable, try to be
that's right.
flexible, but
Yeah.
you know, things have changed.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really, really good word. I would ask if you're willing to share, is there a challenge that you're facing right now? And if so, like how are you overcoming that particular challenge, just for encouragement for our listener?
I will, if I could, I'm going to answer that for the people within my realm.
Sure.
and myself personally, because
Mm,
I've gone through quite a bit mentally myself since March of 2020. And I
mm,
think that's our paradigm that we're in right now, depending on when people are listening to this, that we've got a lot of new things that we're dealing with from a health standpoint, from a political standpoint, from a probably a financial and economic standpoint, and probably much more than that. So
mhm.
Nikki, the biggest challenges that I faced as 2020 rolled along, because it should have been an extremely exciting time for us. We were in Colorado. It was a little bit chilly to be in an RV in Colorado in February, March, April of 2020, but that's where our grandchild was being born. That's where our daughter and son-in-law lived, and we wanted to be there. And we live in an
Mhm.
RV, and we can
Mhm.
be. So we
Mhm.
were there for that, but it's also a time when the world started shutting down. And I recognized that I was really grieving. And I believe that I was grieving because I remember what I went through, my soul, how damaged my soul was during that difficult time that we went through. And I knew that millions, if not hundreds of millions or billions of people around the world would be going through similar, not exactly, but similar, because
Yeah,
and regardless of how one believes, we can't shut down the economy and expect it not to have serious repercussions.
that's right.
That's just the way it is, okay?
Yep.
And that's not a political statement. It's not saying we should have or should have done that. It doesn't matter. Our economy is built on increase. It has to keep building and building. And if we shut it down for
Mhm.
30, 60, or 90 days or portions of it, there's going to be a lot of collateral damage, probably a lot of
Yeah.
damage. And so I went through a lot of grieving. And then I felt as if I needed to stay up to date on some of the things going on. So I was reading way too much news, and I don't have TV or anything like that, even though there's one behind me. You might see that in the RV. We just use it kind of as a screensaver. We play music and different things like that. And that's all it does, and shows nice encouraging images and things, and so
Beautiful.
that's all we do. But I was reading, I was studying, because I felt like I needed to know for my clients and myself. And I realized that not only was I grieving, but mentally I was losing my edge. I was losing my ability to think clearly, because I was getting
Wow.
bogged down with the cares and the concerns and the anxiety and the fear of the world. And I think many people did that. I think many people
Yes.
of great faith did that. Many people that probably understand, like me. I've been 30 years in the mental and leadership game, and
Mhm.
I probably lost my edge. And I know many people that did also, just getting caught up. You jump onto social media maybe
Mhm.
to try to post something positive or see what's going on. And before you know it, you're 10 minutes scrolling through all the negative and the ugly and all of that that's going on. So Nikki, I think
Mm.
the most important thing is for us to understand that what goes into our minds programs us. And that was the challenge that I faced. I was allowing things, and I knew better. Some people don't.
Mhm.
I knew better. You
Yeah.
probably know better, based on many of your listeners know better, but I can almost guarantee that there's someone listening to this and they're going, amen, brother Tim, you preach,
Mhm.
because they went through or are continuing to go through the same things,
Right.
because we are in an extremely tumultuous, chaotic world. And
Mhm.
we have to really get ourselves to where there can be chaos spinning and going all around us. But this
Yeah.
soul, this mind, will, and
Mhm.
emotion stays steady,
Yeah.
stays focused on the task. And you mentioned morning routine. Maybe we'll talk about that, or the scriptures, the
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
things that are important to us, the relationships that are important, the daily tasks that are important. All
Mhm.
of those things are important so that we can control the things that we can control, and don't get off track with
Yeah.
the things that we can't.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, thank you so much for sharing that, and how, like, for our listeners, um really, I think this is a both and, because I was going to ask you, like, what encouraging thing would you would you leave the listeners with? But how did you find your way out? Because I mean, we could pretty much scroll every day and find out or immerse ourselves in the things that are happening and get caught up, and our minds can overwhelm us. How did you, I know that you said that was something that you went through. What were the steps? Could you give us like maybe two actionable steps before we wrap up of how to handle that, uh, getting out of that?
Yeah, and these are very practical. We're in an incredible time where we have all these devices where we can connect to literally everything that's going on in the world.
Sure,
And we are in an incredibly challenging time where we have these devices that we carry around that can allow us to connect to the world at any given time.
sure.
And I'm going to say a statement that's going to sound harsh, but I think you'll understand what I mean. We can either be a slave to those devices and that information, or we can make it be a slave to us. And so, what we need to do is control those things. So, here's my practical that works for me. And
Okay,
I recommend that people need to find what works for them. I've got
sure.
a have got a small little space in the RV that you're seeing and some others may not be able to see. That's the passenger seat. And I'm on my laptop and I've got a little light for my YouTube videos and I've got my phone right here and I've got my iPad and my remarkable notepad. And 90% of the time they stay right here.
Mm,
Now, I go out with my phone and listen to podcasts but I do not take my phone to the back of this RV, which is where our bedroom is. I do not have any devices in our bedroom. I used to have an iPad that I would read a good bit. I've actually gone back to paper books, as tough as that is in an RV, because what I
yeah,
do is I read them and most of them I'll give them away after I read them. And so I don't take devices so that towards the end of the night, I'm not scrolling and looking and digesting that stuff, even though I probably could do some positive stuff. I don't even give
sure.
myself the option. When I get up in the morning, the first thing I do, this kind of goes to morning routine, is I walk back to the front of the RV and still got, well, my hair's buzzed now, hair's going everywhere, whatever. But I pop in an AirPod, I turn on a podcast like the Courage Collective or something like that, and
Mhm,
I listen for the next 30 to 45 minutes to a podcast while I walk back and go to the restroom, brush teeth, do, this
mhm,
stuff,
mhm.
get the crusty out of my eyes and things and make my coffee, drink my water, take some vitamins and, do those basic things. And then on the table right behind me here, there's a small table. I take my notepad, my Bible, and I sit
Mm,
down and I do about 45 minutes of some hardcore scriptural study. And then
mm,
if it's a given day like today, I'll then move into some just journaling, which is primarily prayer for me.
mhm,
And so I have still not checked emails, Facebook, Twitter, any of those items, which
mm.
we have presences on all of those. And then I even on great days, I take it even a step further, Nikki, that I've got a Bible app that I have called Dwell that I will sit down and I used to do just meditation type stuff. I actually will
Sure.
pop in 10, 15, 20 minutes of just the Bible and I'll sit down and quietly breathe and I'll just let that just immerse itself and
Mm,
plant itself in my soul. And all of our souls have been damaged. We've got to continue restoring them because everything in the world around us is desiring to damage our souls. And so we have to constantly be feeding and making sure our souls are healthy. So I just sit and since the beginning of 2020, I've been listening to most days, not every day, the Sermon on the Mount.
mm,
It's a, it's about 15 minutes. And whether one is listening to this and they consider themselves a follower of Christ or not, they would have to admit that Christ has had incredible impact on the world. So even if they're not a Christ follower and they're listening, I would encourage them to listen to the words of Christ. All of those are red letters. It's about from Matthew 5 ish up to around Matthew 7. and it's about 15 minutes long if it's read. It's the perfect time for meditation. Sit down, be
Mm,
still, be quiet, take in some deep breaths, and just listen to some of the most
mm,
powerful teaching the world has ever known. I think the most,
yeah,
regardless of your belief
yeah,
system.
yep.
And that fed me all throughout the pandemic. I got away from it briefly, and I've just recently gone back to that. So, does that help?
Wow, powerful takeaways. I mean, honestly, very, very encouraging. Two things I think, listeners, before you go to bed, your device is left where you cannot just pick it up. And especially if you are married, have a partner, have children, um, super important message that we just heard from Tim. Be present in those moments after your work day and those times that need your people need you, and your mind needs healing from all of the stuff. And second takeaway is don't pick it up first thing in the morning. And that's, I mean, those are two incredible takeaways that I think we're hearing. If you are following encouraging people, and if you're not following Tim, you're going to follow him now because you don't want to miss out on the encouragement and the thoughtfulness and the love that this genuine man has to offer. And we will absolutely put in the show notes how to connect with you so that people can do that. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Time is precious. We can't get it back. And this has been an absolute pleasure to get to know you. Thank you so much for being here.